Hey, spill the tea 888 here. Today's topic is petty revenge. Story 1. How I got a terrible manager, so embarrassed and stressed she quit. I worked under a manager a few years ago who was awful in every sense of the word. She would throw personal belongings into the garbage, things like designer purses, coffee mugs, etc. Her excuse was they shouldn't be laying around in the open. I understand that, but you don't throw people's personal belongings away. This manager also enjoyed making our lives hell. She would add extra work on us from previous shifts that were short-staffed, as well as add work when governing bodies would be coming in to clean up the area. We would tell her we didn't have the already hilariously ridiculous time to get the impossible work done. She started suggesting we skip our breaks. Whenever we complained we didn't have time to complete work, she would say, "Oh, I never got breaks whenever I worked for 40 years before getting this position." She'd even say things like, "Oh, your breaks aren't that important." Me, being nice to people's face to a point, shouldn't have been messed with. I emailed the general manager of the building as well as his assistant, a union representative, and our union president. I explained how our manager was treating the staff regarding our breaks and how our belongings were literally being thrown in the garbage. Nobody responded to my email, but, with the system we used, you could see everyone who saw it. So, when everyone saw it and I received no reply, I replied to the email. Failure to respond appropriately within a week will result in this email being forwarded to the Ministry of Labor and Human Rights Board. I received 2 emails from the union. One was the representative saying he did not agree with the manager's comments, the other from the general manager saying he would deal with the issue. The next day, I came in for my evening shift. The manager was standing next to our reporting area, looking very upset. She pointed at a paper on the wall and explained that the general manager gave her that and that we were to sign off when we took our breaks, and, if for whatever reason we missed it, she was to pay us overtime for it. She then took me aside and told me she did not understand why someone would report her for cracking jokes. I responded with, "Jokes are made when everyone laughs. When you made your jokes about our breaks and throwing our belongings out, not even you were laughing." She quit 3 days later, stating, "Too much stress." Story 2. Malicious compliance. Don't want to pay for my ambulance? How about a helicopter instead? I had an anaphylactic reaction a few months ago and recently received a large bill for being taken to the hospital in an ambulance. Apparently, the ambulance company, while owned by the in-network hospital, was out of network, so the bill was on me. Wanting to avoid this situation in the future, I called my health insurance company to ask what ambulance companies were in network. That's when I learned that absolutely no ambulances for a 150-mile radius are in network, except for 3 helicopter ambulance companies. So I live in a fairly rural area, where many folks are hours away from the nearest hospital, and farm accidents are common, so it makes sense that we have helicopter ambulances. But I live in town, and a ground ambulance is by far the cheapest and easiest thing for everyone. But it's not in network. The insurance representative said that the reason the ambulance wasn't covered was to encourage members to use in-network services. So I said, the in-network option is a helicopter, and I live 3 miles by road from the hospital. Are you sure you want me to use the in-network option? There was a long pause, and she said she had to check with her supervisor. A week later, I got a letter from my insurance company saying that my bill was paid in full. Looks like they did not want that in-network option after all. Story 203. Sports bar manager changing the TV. I was at a sports bar watching UFC fights on a Saturday afternoon. It was pretty dead until around 5 when the early dinner crowd started arriving. One family came in and asked their waitress if they could switch the large projector screen from the fights. She came over and asked me, and I said it was fine as long as they put the fights on another TV. The family had the main TV switched to ESPN, which had one of their special documentaries on at that time rather than live sports. Then the family asked if they could switch the smaller TV that I had just had switched to the fights. The waitress said no, since they'd already requested another TV. The family was annoyed and asked for the manager. When the manager got to their table, the father demanded that the fights be changed so their son, who was probably around 8, couldn't see the fights since they were violent and not family-friendly. The manager tried to calm the family by moving the fights to a TV behind their son, which I would have been fine with. However, the father demanded that the fights couldn't be on any TV as long as the family was at the sports bar. Then he accused the manager of not caring about young children for insisting that the fights remain on somewhere. The manager nodded and said he'd get the TV sorted out. Then he also asked the father if he should change the music playing since it was pop. The father grunted about that being nice, and how the manager was finally being responsible and looking out for children. While this was happening, the manager sent the family's waitress over to put their order in. Then once their order was in the system, the manager switched the TV again. He put the UFC fights back on the main TV, but this time he turned the sound on as well since the pop music could be bad for children. The father started loudly complaining again and called the manager back over. He demanded that the TV be changed again, and when the manager said no, the father demanded to speak to the owner. The manager said he'd get the owner, but it may take a few minutes. The manager changed into a sport coat and came back over. It turned out he was a part owner of the sports bar. Now the father really lost and said his family was leaving. The owner calmly asked if he should have the family's meals changed to takeout orders. The father said they were leaving and wouldn't pay for the food the family had ordered. The owner said the family had to pay for their meals since they were already being cooked. The father continued arguing until the owner threatened to call the cops if they left without paying. The family ended up paying, but left when their food came several minutes later. Until they left, the father made the son sit there with his eyes closed and ears covered so he wasn't exposed to the fight. I busted out laughing once the family left. Anne whore in her outfit and thought. Story 450. AITA for flying back home after my sister called my daughter a slut. I, 42F, and my daughter, 12F, recently flew back to my hometown to visit my mom. My sister, 39F, her husband, 40M, and her kids, 10M, 15M, also flew back at the same time we did as they live in Sweden and we don't get to see them very often. Now for context, my daughter loves clothes. Me and her dad may spoil her a little too much with them, but she also buys majority herself and spends her money wisely. 4 days ago, my daughter was wearing a cropped tank top and some shorts. This top wasn't very short at all and the shorts were at a good length, not being particularly short. A little later that day she overheard my sister and her husband talking as she was waiting for the bathroom out in the hallway. She heard my sister call her a slut and an attention whore in her outfit and thought that she was trying to impress her 15-year-old son. Once she was out of the bathroom she started crying and told me all the things my sister said about her. I was furious. Why would a full-grown adult say that about a 12-year-old girl? I brought up what she had said at dinner that night and she confessed to absolutely all of it and called my daughter a slut again right to her face. We left the dinner table and she started crying again. That night I got us a flight back home because I did not want to be around my sister anymore. The next day I told my mom and my sister that we were leaving and my sister blew up at me, calling me an immature asshole because of some silly feedback she gave on my daughter. I told her that she was the immature one, commenting on a 12-year-old girl's appearance. We left and my sister has told everyone on my mom's side of the family. I'm getting a few messages from relatives saying that what she did was wrong, but it was childish of me to walk out like that on a trip that was supposed to be fun. But most of them, including my mom, are in full support of my decision, which I'm very happy about. I'm thinking of going no contact with her, AITA? Edit. I would like to add that my family is Jewish and my sister and her family are Orthodox Jews. Though they dress modestly because of religion, I don't feel this is a good reason as to call her names if we are not Orthodox.